I'll just call them gun control advocates. All right. Or what do they call themselves? Gun violence reductionist or something. They have some funny term for themselves.
Gun safety advocates.
Gun safety. All right. Yeah. I know what that means. I've read enough Orwell to, figure that one out.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi, folks. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 238. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week. And for those of you who are new to the show, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here. Today, we are doing another of our variety show episodes where we change formats every couple of weeks. This week, we have a little bit of everything. We have Mia Anstein, our resident hunting guide, Sergeant Bill Sylvia, our masterclass competitive shooter, and normally we have Pastor John Bennett with us to pontificate on ethics and theology and culture, but as I mentioned last week, Pastor Bennett is traveling to California to officiate a family wedding, so we wish him safe travels, and Lord willing, he'll be back with us for our God and Guns show next week. So that means that today we have a ballistic minute from Sergeant Bill and a new motivation from Mia. But first, I want to thank the men and women who make this show possible, the members of what we call the Reformation Gun Club. And this week's shout-outs go to David from Milford, Connecticut, the disreputable Bartlett, Brian from Riverton, Wyoming, Frank from Lake City, Michigan, Turbo 1889, John from Spokane, Washington, Eric and Tamara from Durant, Oklahoma. Thank you all so much for your support, and thank you to all of you who are members of the Reformation Gun Club. Armed Lutheran Radio is listener-funded, and that means we don't have any advertising. You're not going to hear us take a break and tell you about some great product or some company. We are funded through the generosity of our listeners, and those people are what we call the Reformation Gun Club. They are the ones who make sure that we keep doing what we do. If you would like to find out about the benefits of becoming a member, we have all kinds of exclusive content and swag and get-togethers and things like that. You can check all of that out, find out what it's all about, what it costs, how you can support the show at armedlutheran.us/gun club, or you can look for a link in the show notes for this or any of our previous episodes. All right, before I turn things over to Bill and Mia, I did want to discuss something that's been on my mind this week. Oceania was at war with East Asia. Oceania had always been at war with East Asia. A large part of the political literature for 5 years was now completely obsolete. Reports and records of all kinds, newspapers, books, pamphlets, films, soundtracks, photographs, all had to be rectified at lightning speed. Although no directive was ever issued, it was known that the chiefs of the department intended that within 1 week, no reference to the war with Eurasia or the alliance with East Asia should remain in existence anywhere. That's from George Orwell's 1984. And this past week, we witnessed 1984 come to life in real time. Now, I don't know whether you took time to watch any of the idiotic confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. It was really a waste of time because they really couldn't impeach her character or her, because she's a woman, you can't go after her like you did Kavanaugh. They sort of learned their lesson after that because America really saw how nasty and ugly and deceitful the left is when they attacked Kavanaugh. Little hard to go after a mother of 7 and a devout Christian the same way that you did Kavanaugh, though they tried. I mean, Mr. Potato Head, Cory Booker, not Smarticus, decided to ask her if she denounced white supremacy, sitting there with her 2 black adopted children. Mazie Hirono, the senator from Hawaii, who was simultaneously the most despicable and at the same time the most moronic member of the Senate, even worse than Cory Booker. She, I think it was day 3 or maybe it was day 2, she actually asked Amy Coney Barrett if she'd ever sexually assaulted anyone. Yeah, she asked her this in front of her kids. Mazie Hirono is literally, she has the mental capacity of a walnut. Even after beclowning herself with this ridiculous question that she says she always asks people that come before the Judicial Committee, she then chastised Amy Coney Barrett for using the term sexual preference. She claimed that this term, everyone knows, is offensive to the LGBTQ LMNOP crowd because, and everyone who isn't a backward religious extremist like Amy Coney Barrett knows that being gay or bi or trans or believing you're a unicorn is totally natural and biological, and you should know that this term, sexual preference, is offensive. And just like the Ministry of Truth in Orwell's novel, Webster's Dictionary changed the definition of the term sexual preference on their website. The definition of a term was changed, was rectified at lightning speed, to use Orwell's terms, by Webster's Dictionary, not a leftist newspaper. We're not talking about the Daily Beast or HuffPo. We're talking about a website where people go to find the objective definitions of words and terms, where if you were growing up, if you're my age, you remember growing up and actually having a Webster's Dictionary in print, because that's how you looked up the definitions of words. And now we have the technology where Webster's can change a definition to match their particular worldview on the left. Now, look, it's one thing to be a guy living as a gal or vice versa. If you do you, that's your thing, that's up to you. But you can't force people to buy into that. You can't force people to consider it to be normal. You can't expect people to buy into that delirium. That fact, the truth, that biological truth, has to be undone in order to push forward this narrative that you can change your biology because you want to. The fact that the left accuses the right constantly of being anti-science while peddling that same idea that you can change your biology just because of how you feel is astounding. It's gaslighting. You're anti-science because you don't agree with our climate change policies, but also men can have babies. Oh, and everybody knows that sexual preference is an offensive term. How dare you? Doublethink is the power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting them both. There's no such thing as sexual preference. But infants can choose what sex they want to be. You can actually believe both things to be true even though they're contradictory. We now live in a world where 1984 is absolutely possible, and we watched it happen this week. We are dependent on technology that tracks our movements and our interests and shares that information with God knows who. What we know to be true, the Definitions of words, for instance, can be changed in an instant. Immutable truth can be twisted. News can be suppressed. We saw that this week as well. Facts can be twisted to push a narrative. 2 and 2 are 4, right? But sometimes they're 5. Sometimes they're 3. Sometimes they're all of them at once. Definitions of words changed in an instant so that no trace of what was true can remain in existence anywhere. This has really dire consequences for our liberties. If we can't trust the news that we consume, if we can't trust the statistics that we're fed by scientists, if we can't trust the accuracy of history or definitions of words, who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past. This week, we got a glimpse of the world that the left would usher in if they win in November or at some point, and they gain more power than they already have. The power to shape and control thoughts, to direct the information to which you have access, to control it. And make no mistake, the left has absolutely no desire, as we've seen throughout this whole year, with all the rioting and looting and burning businesses down and setting police cars on fire, they have absolutely no desire to be tolerant. Live and let live is simply not something that they're willing to permit. It's not something they can do. They desire power and control, and technology is now a weapon to change the truth before our eyes and to undermine the things that we know and the things that we believe. The left in this country seeks power entirely for its own sake. They're not interested in the good of others. They're interested solely in pure power. Power is not a means, it's an end. And the Second Amendment is the one thing that stands in the way of that end. If you want a picture of human history, what the human experience was like prior to the founding of America for thousands of years, imagine a boot stamping on a human face. That's the future that the left wants again. That's the future that the Constitution stands in the way of, primarily the Second Amendment. That's the reason that they want gun control so badly. It's not because in their heart of hearts they care about gun violence or kids getting shot in schools or saving lives. It's because they know that an armed society cannot be so easily controlled, and that at some point we're going to push back. We have got to make 1984 fiction again. Keep that in mind as you go and vote. If you have early voting in your state, get out and vote. All right, time to stop rambling and turn it over to my awesome cast. Mia and Sergeant Bill are up next. Sit back and enjoy the show, and I will talk to you again next week.
Time now for Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Hey there, it's Mia here again. I hope you are all doing well. In the past few episodes, I've kind of been going over some statistics because this is a very unusual year, and I'm going to give you one last little tidbit of a statistic. And again, this is from the National Shooting Sports Foundation. They surveyed firearm retailers, and the retailers reported that 40% of this year's gun sales were conducted to buyers who had never previously owned a firearm. The NSSF tracks the background checks that are associated with firearm sales, and it's based on the FBI's National Instant Background Check System. And they looked at January through July of 2020, and of course, we already know it's a record, but the record is 12.1 million background checks. That's up 71.7%. Wow. I just wanted to share that last statistic with you. That percentage is up from 2019. This is an insane year. And while we're talking about it, I really want to talk to you kind of about where people get their start with firearms. And many gun owners, myself included, we know the saying, it all starts with a daisy. And that there is because we had daisy BB guns when we were kids. That's where you learned. So today I found a post on NRA Family, and it was about the Red Ryder BB guns. And so it led me to I want to talk to you guys about a great place to start before you actually buy a gun. With this many new gun owners, I hope that there are some new gun owners that are listening to Armed Lutheran Radio. And if you are new here, welcome. I'm glad that you're listening. There are such great things that we discuss around here. But today I want to talk to you about the Daisy BB gun and also why it's a really good place to start. Daisy is the most recognized name in air guns, and they're also the maker of the famous Red Ryder BB gun. And here in Pagosa Springs, where I live, we are home to the Red Ryder Roundup, and that's a rodeo that's here because Fred Harmon actually lived here in Pagosa Springs. And if you don't know who Fred Harmon is, he is the creator of the Red Ryder comic strip. And that was a comic book which was really popular in the 1930s. And that is precisely when the Red Ryder branded BB gun was introduced. I actually had a Red Ryder BB gun when I was a kid, and I just thought I was the Lone Ranger with my little lever action. And the traditional Daisy is a lever action. It has open sights. Just like that original Daisy model, the Red Ryder model, it has a steel barrel and it has a wood stock. The Red Ryder one has the Red Ryder artwork engraved on the stock, so it's pretty fancy. The Daisy BB gun, it's known by almost every gun enthusiast around the world, and even those who aren't, because we all know about A Christmas Story and how that poor little kid wanted a BB gun and Santa told him you might shoot your eye out. There's that history of the BB gun as well. So this BB gun, for first-time gun owners, it would be a great place to start because it shoots up to 350 feet per second. And that there, it is fast enough to shoot at targets and such, and maybe even kill some squirrels, something like that. But also, if you're just learning and you're just shooting at targets maybe attached to a fence or a tree or something like that, remember to wear your safety glasses because there is the possibility of a BB ricocheting and you just might shoot your eye out. So why shoot an air gun? The bottom line is that with the BB gun, and especially a Daisy BB gun, the lever action is just plain fun. I mean, it's part of the Wild West and cowboy thing. And the original Daisy BB guns had kind of a plastic lever, but they did evolve and they put a metal lever on there so that they're more durable. But this is an excellent way to help children and adults develop gun safety and handling skills. And those are so important. And that part there is why, if you haven't been around guns, it's a great place to start. The Red Ryder, it has a really large loop trigger guard, so even adults can fit their fingers in there. It has a button safety right behind the trigger, just like on a lot of long guns that are high-powered, high caliber. And that safety, it has the red ready to fire on there, so you can practice just like it's the real thing. It's important to know that the safety is there, but it's also important to know that the safety is a mechanism which can fail. We teach that in hunter education, but that's something that you need to know if you are a new gun owner. The Daisy BB gun, it has the look of a tubular magazine like an actual real rifle, but the real magazine in the BB gun is inside of the barrel. And that magazine can hold up to 650 4.5 millimeter steel BBs. So it can hold quite a bit, and it has a little peephole so you can kind of look in there to see if you're still loaded, if you have any more BBs in there, or if you're out. The BB guns are great for hunting, they're great for target practice, and they're really fun for competitions. And a competition is a great way, once you've got the basics down, it's a great way to hone your skills and really develop your muscle memory and reaction time, which would lead into a lot of what Sergeant Bill talks about in shooting competitions with firearms. So this is something with that BB gun, it's a great place to begin. The Red Ryder comes with open sights, and those I think are fabulous because they're such a great way to help youngsters and adults learn how to use the open sights. And this is something that I see all the time in hunter education class. Some kids come in and they know exactly what the sight is and how to line it up, and other kids don't have any idea, and it's because they weren't exposed to it when they were younger, and so they don't know. So it's just something that if you're wanting to learn, it's a great place to start. With the BB gun, you can kind of practice an up, a down, a side, and see where that shot's going to hit. The Red Ryder does come with an adjustable rear sight. It does only adjust for elevation, so it will adjust up and down, but not left to right. So if your shots are always going high, you can adjust that rear sight to bring them down a little to hit right where you want. For shooting competitions, it's so much fun because you can shoot, just try to do like a bullseye. You can get dartboard type targets where you keep a score. There's a lot of different game targets. You can also, if you don't have those, you can shoot aluminum cans, or you can get lollipops and put those into a board and try to shoot lollipops with them. Or a really fun challenge that a friend had at their place is they attached clothespins to a clothesline, and you just have them hanging down and you try to shoot them and make them spin. So that's kind of fun, and it's something that parents and children can do together and try to focus and develop responsibility. Daisy, I'm talking about adults and kids, but in this article that I shared from the NRA, and it's been about a year, but Daisy answered the call to adults. So they actually have an adult-sized Red Ryder BB gun. It's a model 1938 ARR, and so that's adult Red Ryder. This rifle is pretty much the same as the traditional Red Ryder, except the stock, the butt stock, is 2.35 inches longer in the adult version. That's the only thing that's really different. It allows you to get your cheek on the stock and get a good eye on that rear sight and be able to see your target. The adult version is available just by itself, and it comes by itself in a box set with the BB gun and safety glasses, or you can get it along with the youth BB gun and 2 sets of safety glasses if your family doesn't yet have the youth model. So that is something that you may be interested in, whether you're a new shooter or not. And before I go, I want to remind all of you, not just new shooters, but I want to remind you to always follow the 4 rules of firearm safety. So always treat your firearm as though it is loaded. Always keep your finger off the trigger and outside of the trigger guard until you are on target and ready to shoot. Always keep your muzzle pointed in a safe direction, and always know your target and what is beyond. On that note, you guys have a great one, and I will talk to you next time.
You can read more from Mia, watch her YouTube videos, or check out her podcast, Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, at miaandstein.com. Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Sylvia.
Hey everybody, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Today I want to give you a quick review of
the Mr. Bullet Feeder by Double Alpha. So a few months ago, I broke down and I bought a bullet feeder for my Dillon 650 press. I had been kind of going back and forth whether I wanted to get one for the last year or so, and I finally figured, you know what, I'm just going to get it, try it out. If I like it, I keep it. If I don't like it, I'll sell it to somebody I know. There's always somebody looking for one of those, so I pulled the trigger and I got one. Now, I primarily shoot 9mm, so I set it up on my Dillon 650 that loads 9mm. And the setup was pretty simple. I have an aftermarket case feeder, so I couldn't hook it onto my case feeder like you would a Dillon case feeder. So there was a little hiccup there, but I have a brother-in-law who's pretty dang handy, and he fabricated up a little stainless steel stand just for my bullet feeder, exactly the way I wanted it. I kind of drew him up some plans and showed him what I wanted, and gave him the measurements, and a couple days later, he came back with the stand that was perfect for me. Now, one of the dilemmas I had in whether I was going to get a bullet feeder or not was that on a 650, because it has 5 stations, I've been using a powder check, and to use a bullet feeder, you either use a powder check with the bullet feeder, and then you have to combine your bullet seating and bullet crimp into one stage, one die, and I don't really like doing that. I like to use a Lee Factory crimp die. So I just took off the powder check and decided to run without it. Now, running without the powder check after several years of running my 650 with a powder check meant that I had to make sure and watch in the case that there's powder in there, that there's the correct amount of powder, and really be diligent about looking into the case before cranking the handle on my press. So I've been loading for the last few months with it, and I'll have to say it makes the reloading process smoother and faster. So there's not a pause when I'm putting a bullet on or reaching for another one, and both hands are doing different things. I'm not looking at the bullet in the seating station trying to make sure that it's in there correctly and it's not going to crunch the edge of the brass. It just, because all I'm doing is running the handle and looking at the shell plate, looking at the case to make sure there's powder in it, and I'm kind of watching everything else that's going on. It makes it just smoother. It had very easy setup. There was a couple different things you have to kind of dial in for the angle that it's set at, and the bullet shape you're using, and the different calibers you're using, but it was very easy to set up, and there was no problems with it whatsoever. It's very consistent once you get it set up. It doesn't really have any problems. When I initially started, I was getting some bullets that were coming down the tube upside down, that were going nose first instead of the base first, but a couple tweaks and I got that figured out. I did have a problem because I was using the stand. It wasn't right directly above where the die is that puts the bullet on the case. So I was getting occasionally, it would either not drop a bullet or it would drop 4 or 5 at a time, which was kind of a pain in the butt. I made some tweaks to it by using some zip ties to get the tube that goes down to the bullet feed die so that it was more straight up and down and it didn't have any tension and it wasn't pulling it side to side. And that helped a lot. And then, wouldn't you know, about a month after I got that all figured out, Double Alpha came out with a additional part for only a few dollars that was basically 2 rings with springs on either side, that, because the die body sits in the tool head and the other part of it moves up and down, it added some springs on either side of it to kind of keep the tension and make sure it moved back into its original position. So I ordered that, got it, and it works even better. Now the power controller has like a speed knob on it, and I actually use it on the lowest setting, the slowest setting, and it still runs more than fast enough for the speed that I'm loading. You can start it out really fast if you're just getting started and you want to fill the tube real quick to get started, but it's really not necessary. Did a couple speed tests with it, just loading at a very comfortable pace, and I could easily load 500 rounds of 9mm in 30 minutes. So in a half hour, 500 rounds, that's just fantastic. The one thing that I did add to my press, instead of having an output bin, I bought Double Alpha's output chute, which is basically a funnel with a spring on it that runs down, and now instead of having that little acro bin from Dillon on the end of the press where the cartridges come out to, it runs down into a military ammo can, and you can just keep cranking away. And I mean, I got a 50 cal can, and I can get a little over 2,000 rounds of 9mm in there, and it's fantastic. So it's a win-win. It's a little expensive, but it speeds up your loading. It smooths out the press operations. It allows you to focus on what's going on the shell plate without moving your attention over to the bullets and the bullet tray and bouncing around. And it just is very smooth and consistent. Once you get it set up, it's just run it and forget about it. It's really nice. So I would say, if you're thinking about it, put some pennies aside, go ahead and get one. I'm Sergeant Bill. This has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Force and a masterclass competitive shooter. You can check out his YouTube videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.